Hey family, Joseph Baba Ifa here on the channel that is connecting you to your destiny with a new video today, once again on La Letra Del Año 2021, or the reading of the year for the world from Cuba for the year of 2021. Before we go any further, guys, please go ahead and press that subscribe button. If it's your first time, if it's not your first time, please go ahead and do so. We just reached 2,000 subscribers and we're going strong, and we're trying to get even more, right? So we can provide great information to people and put them in the right direction and connect them to their destiny, like we like to say. So Ika Ofun, we're still talking about it. I think a great topic that we're going to get into about this Odu that's really important, because a lot of people like to talk about the mystic aspects of Odu and all these beautiful stories and whatnot, but sometimes we really have to take it back to the basics. And one of the things that is most basic in anything, but especially in spirituality, is ethics. And this sign speaks heavily about it, where this is going to be a two-part video about ethics, right? And the first one, or the first part, what I really want to focus on is the basis of these ethics within the spirituality of Ifa. When you think of the Odu Ika Ofun, especially being a Babalawo or even an Olorisha, the first thing that comes to mind is the 16 commandments of Ifa. This was identified in this sign. These are the 16 laws or 16 commandments that were identified for all religious practitioners, Babalawo, Olorisha, or Isefa initiate, or even Aleyo, or somebody that's trying to get involved in these things. If they follow these things, they'll be longevitous and prosperous and happy within the practice of Ifa. So they're all identified here. So right off the bat, Ika Ofun is saying we have to conduct ourselves a certain way if we're going to carry this flag of Orisha and Ifa, right? Now, some of the rules are, never do a ceremony without having the knowledge to do so. Never say you have a rank when you don't. Never be mischievous or, conniving. Never be sinister. Don't lie. Certain things that are really basic, but Ifa said, these are the things we have to incorporate to be able to be prosperous within Ifa. And after thousands of years, they still apply, like most things in Ifa do, if not all of it. So the reason I want to touch on the 16 commandments first and foremost is because it really is the basis of our faith. Regardless how much knowledge you have, if you don't conduct yourself accordingly, knowledge matters for very little. I always say I'd rather be surrounded by good people with little knowledge than, the wise guys that don't have great conduct. Because, knowledge can be acquired, conduct takes a little more effort, So I always say when somebody's trying to get involved in Ifa, at least within my religious house, these 16 commandments are the first things I put in front of them when they receive their hand of Ifa, right? If you want to move forward in this faith, at least within this religious house, these are the things that you have to assimilate. And it's not that I'm trying to get you to memorize all of them. That's ideal. But the beautiful thing about the memory of the heart is you don't have to be able to recite all of them to live all of them. And when you really know something, like Socrates and Plato said, you don't necessarily have to remember it because it's a part of you. It's ingrained in your heart, and that's the best memory we have, is emotional. So when we emotionally invest in these commandments and these laws that Ifa has left for us or put in place for us, we're going to have a great religious career and ultimately a great life. Because even if you're not trying to be an Ifa professional or a spiritual professional, these are great rules when it comes to life, right? So that's the first thing that this sign is saying. So the fact that this sign was revealed this year is Orumela, Orisha, Olodumare. They're all trying to take us back to the basics. Hey, we've learned a lot. Hey, we've expanded a lot. We've grown as a community. We've grown as a population. But let's not forget who we are and how we should conduct ourselves and represent Ifa and Orisha, right? So what could that be touching on? Unfortunately, once again, this is an Odu that speaks of corruption. It speaks of unethical behavior, where every person, and I really don't get involved in all the politics or the digital politics that could be present in Ifa, because everybody has to focus on their religious house from within, and that's where you're going to make a change, from within your home. Just like with your family, how do you affect the world? By positively affecting your family. How do you positively affect the religious community? By positively affecting your colleagues, your peers, your godchildren, and instilling these values in them so they can carry it with them. So Ifa is saying this is what we have to get back to, because unfortunately we're living in a spiritual climate that's very heated, where a lot of unethical things are being done, a lot of improper behavior is being shown by religious professionals and priests. And Ifa is saying, hey, everybody can make a mistake, but let's kind of regroup and let's get back to basics and knowing who we are and how we need to conduct ourselves based on the way the Orishas wanted us to, right? So that's the first thing Ika Ofun is saying. There's another set of laws that was actually born here. And those laws are the laws of the Iyawo, or the recent initiate in Ifa, going through their first year after going through the process of consecration in Olorisha, right? So Ifa is saying the laws of the Iyawo were born here. And we'll actually delve into that pataki. It's not readily available, but I think it's very important that we understand the concepts here, right? So what ended up happening is there was, and this is not to be confused with the other story that speaks of when Obatala did the ceremony of Orisha improperly. We're going to get into that right now, but let's start with the proper aspect and then we'll delve into the negative, So what ended up happening in this Odu is that there was an Aleyo, right, who wanted to convert themselves into an Olorisha priest or priestess, or the position of Iyawo, right? So what ended up happening is the process was done correctly, at least in this case, where all of the Orishas were taken into account and the proper formalities were done. And then came the process of Itang, right, where we're going to go ahead and talk to you about your destiny or your history. And each Orisha had a vested interest in the Iyawo not only progressing, but having prestige and remaining clean, as the white robes would indicate. So they put prohibitions on the Iyawo as far as places they could go and could not go, right? So for example, when you hear like the rules of the Iyawo are also mentioned in like Eyobe or Baraobe, but the actual list is here in Ika Ofun, which explains why the Iyawo cannot be under the sun at noon, why the Iyawo must be within the home before said hour of darkness, why the Iyawo should not go to the marketplace with frequency after going through their ceremony, why we should avoid the river. All of these very spiritually stimulating places in nature are to be avoided by the Iyawo, because there's versions of the story where the ceremony of pata y cabeza was done, or head and feet, where instead of receiving the pantheon recognized in Cuba, the person received their guardian Orisha as well as Eshu. Based on them not offering to all of the other deities, they were prohibited from going to said spaces for said deities, right? Oshun said, if you did not receive me, please avoid going to the rivers, so that you don't have to go through any processes that are negative, because if I wasn't nourished and I wasn't propitiated in the ceremony, I can't protect you from any phenomenon that's there. It wasn't so much a punishment as much as this is what you were able to accomplish, so based on that, this is what you need to avoid, right? And the same thing happened with Olokun and the ocean, and Bawaluaye in the cemetery, and Oya in the marketplace, right? So it speaks of the laws that the Iyawo is supposed to adhere by, right? So how do we interpret this? Ifa says that this Odu is saying that we as religious people, even us, have to realize we are not God, and there are things that we have to avoid, right? Even we have limitations. And what happens is when we start forgetting that we're human beings and that we have limitations, we start taking actions that are incoherent, whether it be insulting a fellow brother publicly, whether it be mistreating a client or abusing a client from an economic standpoint, and charging unjustly. Not that there's like a regulation when it comes to what to charge, but we as a community, we kind of have an idea, hey, this is around what something like this could take, right? But, to each his own. The sign is saying all of these things. And then more importantly, it's saying the laws of the Iyawo were born here, where everybody kind of has to remember what we swore to do when we came into this, what we chose to do, what we said we were going to do, and live by a code, right? Just because we're not a Iyawo anymore and we don't occupy this principle and status anymore, or the status of minor, does not mean that we still don't have to live by those rules. Maybe not as strictly, but we still have to have those concepts there where, not so much of places we can go and can't go, but things we can do and can't do. The rules don't get more lax as we get older. And Ifa is saying that the people that have influence within the religious community, we kind of have to regroup and go back to the beginning and say, hey, this is what we signed up for, and this is how we said we were going to conduct ourselves. Let's refresh our memory and represent our tradition well, so that we finally get recognized and appreciated as a world spirituality, which we have been, but based on conduct, we haven't been recognized as such as a whole. So that's what we're working towards, and that's what Ika Ofun wants us to work towards, as well as Olodumare and all the Orishas, right? So it touches on that. It could even touch on as well the situation that we're going through as a society where there's places we can't go or we have limitations, the Iawo wasn't allowed to go everywhere here. So Ifa says, we have to respect the laws and we have to understand we're not in a state to be able to travel. We're not in a state to be able to fraternize the same way or socialize the same way. But we have to live by the laws that are because they're just there to protect us. So it's not always our job to question the law, but it is our responsibility to know them and follow them, right? As uncomfortable as they may be. And the Iawurahe, for everybody that's been through it, it's very uncomfortable. So Ifa says we may have to adapt that philosophy so that we can actually make progress here, right? And the other Pataki that really touches on the ethics again and really segues into this one from the last one is the Pataki that everybody's talking about where Obadala did the Orisha ceremony wrong. And it's pretty self-explanatory. And I think Orumila is a real comedian when it comes to these things because, the Patakis that are present within the Afro-Cuban oracle, how do you come up with this stuff, right? It has to come from a divine source because who would have thought, who would out themselves like that? With Obadala, honestly, if it wasn't divine, put on blast that, he did everything the wrong way, technically. So we'll delve into that Pataki, and that Pataki, basically, Obadala had an Iawo, or an Aleyu, better said, that was trying to get initiated. And they had already received the derecho, or the cost of the ceremony, and everything was planned. But, unfortunately, things changed in the Pataki, and prices changed, and all these different things. And when the neophyte came to initiate themselves, Obadala said, hey, my child, things have changed. The money that you gave, it's not enough. Or maybe it wasn't even about the money. Maybe it was about, travel restrictions. Maybe it was, just, hey, my daughter's sick. Any of these different things. And he told him, right now isn't the time for you to move forward with your initiation. And of course, the neophyte, the neo-initiate, was very angry at this and very impatient and started berating Obadala, saying, you need to initiate me now. I don't care what's going on. And Obadala tried to reason with him and explain to him, hey, that's not going to go well because we don't have enough to do things correctly. But the problem is Obadala, seeing the money right there and becoming morally and ethically weak and honestly being tired of hearing his hijado say the same thing over and over again, said, you know what, just give me the money. Let's do this, and that way you can just stop bothering me, right? So, in Ika Ofun, it's identified why after the initiation process of an Olorisha, the Babalawo, or his godfather Babalawo, usually isn't present for that ceremony or discussion of Itang, and it's customary for the initiate or the Iawo to go with his Orisha elders to the house of his Padrino Babalao or Godfather Babalawo to sit down and look over the Itang, right? To kind of give his input on it. And the reason it's separate spaces is because we as Babalawos, we never want to interrupt the Oriate and his process of Ita the same way we don't like to be interrupted either, right? Ethics. So when they go to Orumila's house, Obadala and the Iawo show him the book, and Orumila looks at the book and he says, you did Santo? And the Iawo was like, yeah, Obadala, you know what's up. And Orumila was like, but there's a bunch of things missing here. And Obadala was like, what do you mean there's a bunch of things missing? He's like, there's a bunch of things missing here. I didn't do that registro entrada. I didn't do any of these different things. And then there's a bunch of orishas that's missing. What did you do here? And Obadala pulled Orula to the side. He's like, hey, man, this guy had like $5. I had to do the Santo. He was bugging me. And Orula was like, no. We have to go back. You have to do the Santo again. Obadala was like, again? He said, yeah, you never did it in the first place, so we got to get started again. And it was a huge embarrassment for everybody, right? You could say shame on Obadala for becoming weak and, just trying to get things done and giving into the pressure of the client. Or you could say shame on the client for, persisting and not listening to proper advice from his elders. Either way, everybody was wrong. Because, if I have a child and my child's like, I want to jump off a bridge, as much as they want to do that, as much as I want them to stop bothering me about this concept, I have to hold fast and understand that, you may not like me, but I'm also not going to let you do anything that's going to hurt you. And then as a new initiate, the best advice I can give to the people trying to get initiated this year is have patience, because things have changed. And what am I referring to? Let's think of all the cases of people that have been paused from being able to perform their initiations this year because of COVID, right? Whether it be right here in America due to restrictions as far as like density of people, whether it be Cuba, right, which is more accessible for some people, but travel restrictions right now and the quarantine they got going on over there and that $2,000 fine, you don't want those problems. So when we interpret Ifa is saying be patient so that things are done correctly, because Ifa is saying this year there's going to be one of two things happening. Either there's going to be unethical practices on the part of the elders just trying to get this money, or it's going to be, impatience on the part of the client that's going to put them in a very negative situation where their ceremonies are going to be weak and incomplete. And we can't do these things twice. Orisha is a perfect moment, so we have to be ready to go. Everything has to be perfect. Planned, prepared, and paid for, right? Because prices have changed. Let's say you have a godparent that told you said price, back, before all this started, right? Orisha was set amount of money, but you were going to do it in Cuba. Well, there's no chicken in Cuba, right? There's 4 or 5 hour lines to be able to get food. All these different things are happening. Prices have gone up. Based on that, you may feel betrayed, you may feel uncomfortable, any of these different things, you might have doubts, but Ifa is saying, no, this is really happening. This is greatly affecting our community, and we have to react accordingly with Iwapele, good conduct and character, and apart from that, suru, or patience, so that these things can move forward. At the end of the day, you're going to do Orisha and Ifa, or whatever other ceremony you have pending at the predestined moment. Don't rush things, because if we look at the story, the Iyawo, or the initiate, wanted to rush things. The Iyawo could be the religious initiate, or it could be the person in society trying to do things that aren't good for them during this pandemic. Or you could be Obadala, you could be the elder, and you could be like, hey, I'm in this moral compromise of the money's there, but things are done incompletely. Please do the moral thing, because Ifa is saying that temptation is going to be there. And apart from that, you could be a political figure where it's like, well, let's just let them take off the mask and, let's just misadminister this vaccine just so we can have everybody be quiet. That's not what your position entails. You have to have patience, and when you're in a position of power and influence, you have to be ready to be disliked. And unfortunately, even being an elder in this religion, you have to be ready to be disliked. Just the same way sometimes your children are going to dislike you. But the beautiful thing is your job is not to be liked, it's to be respected, and it's to be, followed, right? Because you're giving them the proper guidance. And at the end of the day, once they realize, hey, it was worth the wait, was it really that long of a wait? They're going to be gratified with you, respect you, and follow your lead, which is what we need in Ifa and Orisha. We need leaders. We need professionals. We need people who are ethical. And it starts with ethics, and that's what Ika Ofun is really saying here. Let's avoid unethical behavior. Let's avoid forgetting who we are, and let's avoid forgetting what we swore to do and how to conduct ourselves when we became initiates of this beautiful tradition, right? So ethics, that's the first part of this video. We touched on quite a bit, and we're going to get into the other half of this video, the ethics video, in the next video that's coming out as well. Guys, thank you so much for the support. Botanica Candles and More appreciates you. Joseph Baba Ifa appreciates you. Questions, comments, likes, shares, subscriptions, please. We're growing every day. Really humbling, really blessed, really appreciative. And this Odu is speaking very clearly to us, because we're at a very key moment in Ifa and Orisha, and a very key moment on Earth and the history of humanity, right? So it's about having patience, it's about using our logic, and it's about, making the right decisions. And that's what Ifa is telling us to do right now in all areas of life. So let's go ahead and get into that next video, guys. Blessings, and you take care, familia.